Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star sports podcast presented by Underdog, which got me thinking, Vahe Gregorian, who's our guest today. I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Underdog, of course, is a sports wagering outfit, but I like the title. I like the name of the company, and I got to thinking of what some of the big or best underdog stories in our lifetimes of covering sports would be. Does anything like immediately come to mind?
Immediately, always Miracle on Ice.
Absolutely.
Immediately.
Number one on anybody's list.
Yeah, and we didn't think about this ahead of time. I mean, and right. that just came right to me. We've been, I think, extra fortunate to be at a number of these events. We weren't at that one.
Right.
But, you know, these sorts of moments, as we're speaking here on the last day of March, make me think naturally about the NCAA tournament. And we've seen some doozies there. I think I've seen better ones, but the one that I always think of first with that is being in Oklahoma City for Bryce Drew's shot.
Wow, that was...
which was, 14-3? Or
14 versus
4-13?
Yeah, it was one of those.
One of those, and the beauty of it, of course, was the symmetry of the great photo of Bryce Drew's dad, Homer, just standing there with his arms crossed while his son is in front of him taking a long three, right, to win the game for Valparaiso over Mississippi State.
Ole Miss. I think it was
Ole Miss. You're right. I think it was Ole Miss. And so moments like that,
yeah,
you're right. We could have a fun little catalog of those. What stands out to you about, especially ones you went to?
Well, I didn't go to these, but I think the flavor of the NCAA tournament was in the 1980s, was about the championship game upsets, with probably the first one was NC State over Houston in 83, the Albuquerque game with Lorenzo Charles with the dunk at the buzzer. And Villanova over Georgetown, an incredible game in 85, and even Kansas over Oklahoma at Kemper in 1988. So I know you were at that game. You weren't covering it.
I'd never been at that point. That was my first NCAA tournament game, period. And it was simply because I was finishing my internship at the Post-Dispatch, and a friend had a ticket, and I came over, and what a wonderland to walk into at Kemper Arena. I can't be on this topic and not bring up. I think maybe you were there with me. The UCLA Princeton upset.
Missed it in Indianapolis.
I was there for that.
I don't know where I was that weekend, but yeah, that was the backdoor pass.
That was just great. I saw somebody post that on kind of a top 10 list of these the other day. I don't mean to keep going, but I got one other thing that was my favorite thing in so many ways. It was an Olympic moment. It was the Salt Lake City Olympics in 2002, and I don't know how many of our listeners have watched short track speed skating, but it's roller derby, right, on ice.
It's fun as heck to watch.
It's so fun to watch, and it's pure chaos. And in the final of the men's final, I can't remember the length, one of the longer races, coming around the bend, the Australian guy was last, coming around like the second to last lap, and basically 7 guys wiped out.
I remember that event.
And he won the gold medal. His name was Stephen Bradbury. And the story was great because he had once suffered a horrendous laceration with like 100 stitches, and almost died on his neck from a skate in the sport. So anyway, enough about that. Give me one of the years that you went to.
Well, gosh, that I actually went to. Let me think about that. While I'm thinking about it, I'll stick on the Olympic track and say Roland Gardner's Greco-Roman gold medal over the Russian. I can't remember the Russian's name, but I think that was in the 2000 Olympics.
It was. I think it might have been 2000, or was it? It might have been 96 in Atlanta. Either way, what I remember about it, it was one of those days where I chose otherwise and really regretted it.
Yeah,
which does happen at the Olympics sometimes. You're in the right place. Sometimes you're not.
One of the great early ones would have been in the Super Bowl, the Jets over the Baltimore Colts, Joe Namath guaranteeing it. So, and
then even the next year, the Chiefs were certainly considered that
Vikings,
double digit.
Yep.
I thought you were going to just bring up the Underdog song, which we broke into last time, and that never gets old. I hope the people at Underdog think this is doing them a service to mention that. We're probably happy obliged to play it from now on.
We should get Monty Davis, our producer, to intro this segment with the Underdog theme song. All right, that was fun. Thanks for indulging me.
Okay, that's a show. All right.
A lot of things going on. We're recording this on Monday, March 31st, and I came in here expecting to lead with Royals coming off a sort of a flat season opening series against the Cleveland Guardians, and then the NCAA tournament again with the Final Four set, an all number one seed Final Four, and we will get to both of those subjects. But then I don't know if it was surprising news, but it certainly qualifies as big news. Sporting Kansas City and Peter Vermes agreed to part ways. Our Sam McDowell broke the story on social media, and the only coach that many who follow soccer in Kansas City have ever known is now out. Kerry Zavagnin is the interim coach. So, what are your initial thoughts of a Sporting Kansas City club without Peter Vermes?
You may have used this term when we were speaking about it before, but it stands out to me one way or another. I mean, he's really been the face of the franchise in so many ways, and through so many changes, so many iterations, branding the team, all these things, right? From its infancy in a lot of ways. Certainly the longest tenured, is he the longest tenured coach or manager in Kansas City history?
Boy, that's a good question. I think that is true. Hank Stram he said 16 years for Peter Vermes.
Yeah, and Hank, whatever Hank's final number was, 3 of them were in Dallas.
Right. Ned Yost was the manager for 10 or 11.
Yeah, 10 or 11.
Like
I mean, Andy Reid is still just over a decade, right?
Entering year 12, I believe.
Yeah. No Royals manager really had that long a period.
Nope. Peter Vermes is not only the longest tenured, boss of a team in Kansas City, he is that in MLS history. He's the longest tenured manager and coach in MLS history, and I think it's fair to say that there is no person more associated with an MLS team than Peter Vermes with Sporting Kansas City.
Yeah, well said. And we can break down what broke down, but I do think that it's a sad day. I mean, he was not just recognizable, but a substantial person, right, with great achievements. And I suppose none better than the 2013 MLS title.
Right.
But that wasn't the only thing they got done. And his own history as a player. And also, I think, Blair, we can say this, and Sam McDowell could say it more strongly because he was around him more covering the beat, but just a stand-up guy who, man of integrity, and I thought, was a great reflection of what you want in that sort of job.
Absolutely. Let me give a few things. So in addition to the MLS Cup in 2013, played on one of the coldest days, and it was in the temperature in the teens, and they won a shootout with Salt Lake. There were 3 U.S. Open Cups, and I think it was 8 straight playoff seasons for Sporting. He is the only person to play and coach for an MLS Cup champion that was the same team, right? Played and coach for the same team. He won the MLS Cup with the Wizards. Yeah. But Kansas City. So he had only known success as a player and a coach, manager with Sporting. But maybe one of the way we should remember this tenure, this era of Peter Vermes in Kansas City, maybe for some other things. First, I'll go back to 2010. I think it was his second year at the helm, and the then Kansas City Wizards played Manchester United at Arrowhead Stadium, and 52,000 people showed up, and it was a stunning the sport, or I believe it was Sporting. Did I say the Wizards? I think it was. They were already rebranded and were Sporting that year.
I guess I should remember, but I'm thinking that was around 08, maybe when they rebranded.
I think it was in 2010.
Okay,
that may have been the
I meant the
rebranding.
rebrand. Oh, okay, maybe, yeah. You would remember better than me. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I don't remember that exactly. I just remember Kansas City won the game 2-1, and 52,000 people showed up for a soccer game. And we're now 15 years later, but it was, I think, that moment that people in this town realized that soccer could be supported in a way that it had been in other U.S. cities, but really not here. Even though the Kansas City Wizards were an original franchise, and Lamar Hunt had helped found the league and owned the Wizards, it really hadn't caught on here. I used to take the family to Wizards games in the first few years at Arrowhead, and you can drive your car into the parking lot and park right next to the stadium and get in for cheap tickets, and you and 7,000 or 8,000 other people inside 75,000 seat Arrowhead Stadium were very comfortable. But to play that game, get that friendly against Man U, to have that crowd showed up, I think was the beginning of Kansas City as a soccer city.
Mm-hmm.
And look at what it has produced.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That and as you go along the sort of the timeline of soccer in Kansas City, watch parties at the Power and Light District for World Cup games, men's and women's, and the enthusiasm for the sport growing year by year. I think it's the reason that Kansas City punches above its weight class and was able to land World Cup games for next year.
It's really interesting that you can point back to that, because I've been here a little later than that, since 2013, but you can kind of track the groundswell, and that's a great jumping off point. And also I think the energy and imagination to rebrand and get the stadium, all those things, world class facility that they built to begin with.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the Power and Light, the literal energy from that. I think you can even track a little of how the current came to be, the women's team, through some of that. I mean, there were images of the Long family being in Paris for the Women's World Cup and seeing things in Kansas City on TV, the scenes from Power and Light that helped tell them that they thought Kansas City was ready for a women's team again. So all those things fold together, and I do think, I don't remember if this ever became serious or not, but there was a time in the middle of all this where we thought, after they built that another world-class facility out there with a practice facility, I think it's now Compass Minerals. Is that still the name? I'm embarrassed. I can't remember. It may have changed. It was the Pinnacle.
Then Compass Minerals, right?
Yeah, and I apologize if it's got a different name by now. I don't know that it does or doesn't, even though I was just there a couple weeks ago. But even that was seen as an outpost of a national spot, right? The national team would come there, and maybe Peter would become the national coach. All those sort of things. I mean, they do speak to how this critical mass has come now.
Well, it's such a good facility that it's going to be one of the reasons that Kansas City gets a base camp, multiple base camps. That facility, what the Current has done, and of course over at KU, Rock Chalk Park. So, just as a point of clarification, it was the Wizards who beat Manchester United on July 25th, 2010, with goals from Kai Kamara and Davy Arnaud.
That's great.
So I'm glad we got that for the record.
Did it matter that they won?
It did matter.
Yeah. It was more validation in a way.
That's right. I was going to say it mattered. The attendance is what really mattered. That they won, I think, proved to maybe the sporting conscious here in Kansas City that it could field a competitive soccer team.
Yeah.
And look, it was a friendly game, and
right.
I don't know if Manchester United had its top lines out there, but that was also part of the conversation in the aftermath. Did you see the crowd, and how about us winning that match?
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's neat. That's a great thing to connect.
Yeah, and also under Peter's watch, you had players like Matt Beasler and Graham Zusi represent the U.S. in the World Cup in Brazil, and I thought how cool was that? players like Roger Espinoza, Tim Melia, Benny Feilhaber. Lots of great players came through here in the Peter Vermes era. I don't know. I think I saw a stat where he was the manager for more than half of the franchise's games played. That doesn't surprise me. I mean, they started in 1996 and he took over in 2009. But he is Sporting Kansas City.
Yeah. He is. And look, I what happens in these situations? How does it come to this when somebody's had so much success? It'd be nice if we could all figure out when the exact moment you've peaked is and say, okay, I'm turning it over. And look, I don't know if Peter would say he regrets. I'm sure he regrets how it's played out. But, I mean, he's been here a decade since a lot of big things happened. And maybe at some point it just becomes the need for something fresh.
I'm not going to fault Sporting Kansas City for making this move.
It's hard to.
5-1 going into the season. The one result that they achieved was the 3-3 tie in which they were down 3-0, scored 3 goals against Minnesota, and I thought, okay, launch point. This is going to get things turned around, and it absolutely didn't happen. They've had trouble on offense and defense. They haven't been fun to watch. This move comes a day or so after they went to Dallas, got a 1-0 lead on a Daniel Shallowy goal, and then gave up 2 quickly right after that and lose 2-1. So that kept them winless, and I think the streak is up to 13 games in all competitions without a win since September of 24. So,
well, remember, it was 2 years ago when they didn't win in their first 10 matches, right? And then they finished strong.
Right. And then beat St. Louis.
And yes. And that it sort of made you feel like everything's okay. And not just okay, everything's fine. But then last year was just kind of anticlimactic and led to this big shakeup in the offseason. And it's funny thinking back to their media day about a month ago. There was a lot of talk about patience and it's going to take a while, things like that. But at some level, how you're playing day to day, even if you don't have the horses, even if people don't have the right experience yet, even if they haven't gelled yet, it's still on the guy who's in charge.
Take a swing at picking sports this baseball season with Underdog. Playing on their app is as easy as choosing higher or lower on players' stats. Get them right, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. Sign up today using promo code KCSTAR to get a gimme pick as a part of your first cash entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you deposit. Must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org.
All right, Vahe, let's switch gears. And I think it's safe to talk Royals, even though we're recording this in the 7th inning of the home opener for the Milwaukee Brewers. It is now 10-0 Royals.
Oh, I lost track at 8-0. Wow.
And Jonathan India, who got plunked on the side of the head in his final at-bat on Sunday, we didn't know if he was going to play today. At this point, he's 3 for 5 with a couple of runs and RBIs. So Salvi's homered, Garcia's homered. So it's a good day, and maybe the most for the Royals, the most positive piece of news to come out of today's game is the starting pitching. Kris Bubic, the guy who owns the number 5 role in the rotation, and weren't 100% sure who that was going to be in spring training. Bubic won the slots, pitched really well today. 6 innings so far, 8 strikeouts. Looks he's well on his way to getting the win. So this game is happening after the Royals look kind of flat, I think, in their season opening series against the Guardians. Yeah,
it was interesting, so they lost the opening day, and they lost it with some blunders and just some misplays that were really dispiriting, I think. And not that you can't make up for it. It's game 1, but when you got 40,000 people there and the energy and anticipation is so high. I think the Royals really felt that one deep inside. They certainly played better Saturday, but then yesterday was kind of a lost day, and I remember feeling like, boy, are we going to see another one of these just holes they get themselves into early in the season? So here today they scored, I guess, as many runs as they scored in the first 3 games combined, and they get their best start of the season.
Yeah.
And through the guy that is basically the X factor in the rotation. I mean, all the other 4 guys, you have certain level of expectation from, a baseline. With Kris, he's had so many ups and downs, both in his health and his own volatility at times. You didn't quite know what you could think, and what a good thing for that to take place today.
He's following up a starting pitching performance in the Cleveland series where Cole Reagan, Seth Lugo, and Michael Wacha went a combined 14 innings and gave up 9 base on balls. This was something the Royals didn't do much of last year. They had really good control, ate up a lot of innings.
Yeah.
I think 2 of them went 5 and Wacha went 4.
That's right. Reagan started the 6th, and I think Lugo went 5 and Wacha did go 4. And Reagan's had trouble in the first inning. He had 22 or 23 pitches in the first inning, had a walk, but also gave up a couple soft hits. But once that starts happening, especially early in the season, then your pitch count gets up. You're not going to go far. And I remember one of the things last year, Blair, that was really telling about that rotation was, I think the Royals kind of got over that hump where you used to think for a long time the rotation was only capable, you're lucky if you got 5. Last year we got to a place where you're thinking 6 or 7. And, of course, that's an automatic bridge to the back end of the bullpen, and you don't have as many variables in between. So there's no reason to necessarily think these guys are in any decline. I mean, these are all incredibly small sample sizes, but, you'd like to see a little more out of them the second time around.
One thing I did like from the opening series was the hard throwers from the bullpen. Carlos Estevez. Or Estevez, how are we?
Estevez, I think. There is an accent in there.
Okay, I like that. Hunter Harvey and Lucas Ursay.
Yeah, all the right-handers.
Yes, the right-handers threw the ball hard, very effective.
Yeah.
And I that's a positive, I think, for the Royals.
For sure, and it was even a positive on opening day. I mean, the problem was that the left-handers weren't so great. And look, they expect better things out of Angel Serpa, and just a bad thing to come in and throw one pitch and have your team be behind. It's just, and I can't remember if he has pitched since. I can't remember if he pitched yesterday. I don't think he did, but he needs to get some more work again soon. They're too high on him to make that a worrisome thing. He's just got to get past it. And
just a note for all of our Milwaukee Brewers fans that are listening. I feel bad for you guys. The 9-home run game against the Yankees on Saturday, they lose 20-9. They lost the finale of that series 12-3, and now they're down 10-0 to the Royals. That's unbelievable. That's 42 runs in 3 games in less than 3 games. How in the world does that happen?
I don't know, but that does tend to domino. I mean, because now you're going into the bullpen early, and boy,
they had a position player.
And this was opening day at home today.
Well, that's right, because they opened in New York. But they had a position player pitch in 2 straight games in New York. So tough sledding for the Brewers. All right, I want to read something from the Star. This was about a month ago. Our colleague, Callis Robinette, who covers the Kansas State Wildcats, does a great job covering K-State. He got in touch with you and me and Pete Gradhoff and Jesse Newell and some others about their NCAA tournament picks. Now, we didn't have to give them a bracket. We just kind of, how would you describe? Just a little narrative of how we think the tournament's going to unfold?
I think the bottom line was it was supposed to be a bold prediction.
Bold prediction. That's right.
So you kind of had license to just riff.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go over some of the headlines because he broke them out into headlines. I won't identify the author until maybe the end, but somebody had UC San Diego will make the Sweet 16. No, didn't happen. They did have a good opening game.
I think that one was said with strong conviction too.
It was.
Was it like
yes, it was.
Bet on it. Was it?
Yes, yeah, and from the same person who, if I have this right, is the biggest Sky Moore fan of among our staff members.
No names, but
no names. But I will
also,
own up.
by the way, he's always right. He's right on so much. Seriously, he is incredible with these things. So it's fun to make fun of him in this situation. But
I'll tell you how right Jesse Newell is on these things. He's so right that he had Auburn basketball fans, creating posters and signs at games, calling him out. And he was right. He was accurate. Jesse's amazing, actually.
I mean, he has predicted a number of times. He's predicted exact scores of games, basketball and football.
I think among those of us that are in this crazy profession and do that, he's the best.
Yeah,
at least among the star folks. Another headline: Tom Izzo will guide Michigan State to another Final Four. That was mine.
That culprit was
that one. That one didn't work. Another one: Louisville and BYU will both make the Elite Eight. BYU got to the Sweet 16. Louisville didn't get out of the first round. High Point will send Purdue home early. Didn't happen. But we get to the bottom one. Number 1 seeds will dominate. And I quote from that: as I went through my bracket on Tuesday, I realized I predicted way fewer first-round upsets than I normally do. Just 2 in the first round, in fact. The thing you need to know, I'm going round by round, and presto, I came up with all 4 number 1 seeds reaching the Final Four without having started thinking it that way at all. So how about that?
So it shows a certain thoughtlessness, first of all.
The tagline on this paragraph: Vahe Gregorian, star sports columnist. Nailed it.
First of all, I couldn't have done the nailed it bit like you just did. I can't get to that pitch. But second of all, in fairness to myself, I did tell you about this. I don't know if you would have remembered, but I really didn't know that you would wish to share it with the audience. But I'm glad you did, because you know what? I never get these things right, and it's actually my nicest bracket ever. And
you not only had the Final Four, but you had the Elite Eight.
I did have the Elite Eight.
You nailed the Elite Eight. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible, because it wasn't all 1 versus 2. As chalky as this tournament was, you still had a Texas Tech in there.
Yeah, 3s and 4s.
Let's see. I don't have it in front of me.
Anyway, so it's just luck. Usually my thing is blown up, by the first weekend. So it's kind of fun to do that. It reminded me why I fill out the bracket, even though we no longer publish these things, because we want to have a disclaimer on them all. So have you enjoyed the tournament?
I have. I think it's been the sort of the theme early was no Cinderellas, and I think Cinderella, the upsets, the 12s over the 5s, the 13s and 14s winning first round games, always fun, great drama. Usually those are tense, close games. Usually they're mid majors or low majors, veteran teams that shoot the heck out of the 3 and beat a 19 and 11 major, right? And so we really didn't have, the closest thing we had was Colorado State falling to Maryland on a buzzer beater in the first round.
I was watching that. That would have been the one that threw everything a little bit.
So there really wasn't any of that. But after that round, I like the chalk. I prefer good games throughout starting with the second round, and we've had that. In this tournament, just power teams. And the Final Four that we have, 2 SEC teams, Florida and Auburn, will play the first national semifinal. Then Duke against Houston in the second semifinal. I think both should be outstanding games.
Yeah, I have no idea who to pick out of this group at all, which is why I left that part of my Final Four bracket blank, apparently. Hey, so what do you do? We didn't get to really talk about this either on the pod or just in casual conversation, but so it was 4 conferences that sent everybody to the Sweet 16.
That's right.
Only 4. Does that signal something about sort of the shifting plates of the way things have worked in the portal and NIL era, or is it just sort of like one of those strange years?
A little bit of both. I think it's there was a little bit of an oddity, and it happens from time to time.
Yeah.
But there's also no doubt that among the recent rules changes in college sports that has had an impact, especially in basketball, is the free transfer rule.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to sit out when you transfer anymore, so it's easier to go from school to school. And what we've seen in this NCAA tournament are programs that have thrived with transfers from mid-majors.
Yeah.
Clayton from Florida, Sears from Alabama, on and on. I read a stat where of the 80 starters in the Sweet 16, 60 had started their career. 60% had started. Well, 60. I'm sorry, 60 had started their careers at other schools, and more than half of those were from mid-major schools. So it's almost like a minor league system. You spend your first couple of years, at a Morehead State or a school like that, and then you show promise. You make all conference.
Yeah.
You're the conference player of the year, and now you want to go to an SEC school where your NIL money is substantially greater than where you are, and your exposure and the competition is better. I don't see that changing.
Yeah.
What I do think is important to understand going forward is on the day of the national championship game, next Monday, earlier in the day, the NCAA is supposed to get the final word on the House settlement. People, when they hear the House settlement, people think that's the House of Representatives. It's not. There was an athlete named, I forgot his first name, but his last name was House. He was a swimmer at Arizona State, and he's the named plaintiff in the House versus NCAA suit that is going to essentially allow schools to pay athletes directly. And every power school, that means SEC, Big Ten, Big 12, ACC, is going to have about $20 million as a payroll for its scholarship athletes. The schools, we assume that all four of those conferences all have football ambition and men's basketball ambition. So probably going to fund football to about 75% of that. And then basketball, maybe 15 to 20%, and then maybe women's basketball, 5%, and the others get the rest. And what I think we're going to learn coming out of that is who cherishes basketball more. Are they willing to cut into the football slice of the pie to pay their basketball players more? Are the Dukes and Kansases and Carolinas and Kentuckys going to maintain their blue blood status and emphasize winning to such an extent that it could, lessen the pie for football and maybe other sports? And the other question about this is, what about the non-football playing schools, the Marquettes, the Creightons, the Providence, the Big East schools largely, Villanova, which has, low-level football, not power football. Even if they decide not to, if they can't fully fund their athletic programs to the tune of $20 million, say they get half of that. They've got $10 million to spend on their athletes. Well, football or basketball is going to get, that's the big sport at those schools.
Yeah.
So if you're Creighton, do you use 75% of your $10 million to splash on your men's basketball program, which would be more probably than an SEC school or a Big 12.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
These are things to keep an eye on in the next few weeks.
Do you feel like, part of the hope is that this will make this feel less like the Wild Wild West overall. Do you think that will have that effect? I
think that college sports, to some extent, has always felt a little chaotic.
Yeah.
A little chaotic. We're always changing the rules. We're always changing the number of football teams that are in the playoffs. We're always, looking at expanding the basketball tournament. It's never been more chaotic than it has been in the last few years with NIL, free transfer portal, coaches moving, like crazy to different schools. Coaches have been in transfer portals forever, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, I don't know. I guess I'm of the belief that if a sport is important at a school, it will do what it takes to keep that sport important, nationally prominent. In Alabama, that's football. In Kansas, that's basketball. And does that mean that Kansas would never be able to compete with Alabama on the football field? Well, maybe once in a while, but historically it hasn't. So why should we believe going forward that it will? Missouri, this will be a topic for another day, but Missouri to me is the fascinating example of this. Ambitious, in a position to to fully fund all of its sports and be a player, because the SEC is, their schools are so ambitious. But what is Missouri going to be in this new world of college athletics? Are they how will they distribute their money to athletes?
Look, and that's maybe I've told you this story before, but I remember when this first started, I was down at SEC Media Day when NIL first started, and it was the year Bryce Young got $1 million deal for Alabama from a car dealer in Birmingham, I think it was. Maybe it's Tuscaloosa. And we're meeting with the Missouri players, and I can't remember, it was a lineman, and we got talking to him about what his NIL deal was, and it was the suit he was wearing from Men's Warehouse in Columbia. And I remember thinking, this is not exactly, leveling the playing field. Pardon me, you see, I just looked up something, what it was, and this is for another conversation, but I had not learned about this till recently. Maybe you knew, but local young lady, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her first name, but it's Nijaree, and I don't want to say it without knowing it, Kennedy.
I do that all the time. Mispronounce people's names.
Well, don't let me stop you, but take a wild guess. But she was at Stanford playing softball, and she was best pitcher in the country. She's now at Texas Tech because she got an NIL deal of $1 million. And where's the room for that in this model? I mean, will that continue to flourish for sports that aren't the big two at each school, let's say? One
thing we do know is that with this House settlement and basically a salary cap for college athletics, which is about $20.5 million, which will escalate each year, but for the first year, the 25-26 school year, about $20.5 million. The schools are intending to get to reel in NIL and to allow it to be what it was intended to be. Not a signing bonus, not a recruiting tool, but just fair market value for your name, image, or likeness. You are now getting, you all now have a contract from the school that pays you $250,000 to be a football player. You're not getting $1 million from the booster under the guise of NIL. That is the hope and the ambition of the House settlement. So we'll see where it all lands. Yeah,
it's really interesting. And I don't know about you, but I go back and forth with feeling like a little overwhelmed and frustrated with it. And okay, let's remember the reason all this started is that a long-term issue with everybody else making zillions of dollars off what these young people are doing.
Yep.
So it's work in progress, to be sure.
All right, Vahe, great conversation with you as always. I hope we're safe with the Royals, 10-1 in the 8th.
Well, we didn't proclaim them victorious yet, did we? We just said it's
just providing updates, which is
advantage,
which is what you want in a podcast.
That'll come out when exactly? After the game,
at
certainly.
Least 24 hours, right? So anyway, big thanks to our producers, Randy Mason and Monty Davis, and thank you very much for listening to SportsBeat KC, presented by Underdog.